What's up, girls? I just read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is the famous fantasy novelist who wrote all of the Narnia books, but he also has a lot of writing on Christianity. And Mere Christianity is actually originally a series of talks that he gave for the BBC in the early 1940s during World War II. And they were meant to be for the general public and very accessible for Christian troops that might have access to radio for the people at home. And so I read part of these in book form, and then I listened to part of them on Audible. They're super Audible accessible. Mere Christianity is not the original radio broadcasts. He took the series of what was 4 broadcasts, I believe, and then edited them down and refined them a little bit about 10 years later in 1952. A little bit about C.S. Lewis. He was a professor at Oxford. He taught Renaissance English and was really good friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, who taught Old English. And the two of them are credited with inventing the fantasy genre, though it's really more Tolkien than Lewis. And Lewis was actually an atheist before he came to Oxford and began to teach, though he loved myth and fairy tales and all these stories. And over time, he was transformed into a Christian. And I think I've heard that it's partially to do with his friendship with Tolkien, who basically said that the myth of Christianity has become history. Anyway, these essays are arranged topically. It's really easy to read. It's really fun. I would kind of imagine I was thinking about it it's almost as if you had a serene, peaceful grandfather who you are getting tea with in his cottage, and he's trying to pass down all of his practical wisdom about religion and how to live life. It's very sweet, and a lot of the arguments, it's as if he's kind of presupposed all of the popular contemporary arguments against Christianity, and he's finding fault in them, often through analogy. He is a fantasy writer, so he's really great at using analogy and metaphor in his favor. I remember one of them was I believe he was talking about transforming yourself, and he was saying, the purpose in life for a bird might be considered to fly. And you may be comfortable as an egg, but eggs will never fly. And even if the, transformative process of moving from egg to bird is difficult, it's worth doing for the sake of flying. He talks about things like charity. He talks about sex. I believe at one point his take is that, kind of a human awareness or consciousness about sex is not what led to the fall of man, but is a result of the fall of man. He seemed to have a pretty, contemporary view on sex, that it's not such an evil thing. People often associate that belief with, people that are Christian or Christianity in general. He talks about love and marriage, and you can tell he's against the kind of 18th or 17th century, really. No, 19th century France, when all of these kind of romantic notions were swept up, and how the feeling of being in love or falling in love was made to be the ultimate human ideal, whereas Lewis kind of argues against that and argues on behalf of marriage and being with one person, for the rest of your life if you do commit to marriage. Which is interesting. I don't think he actually had any kids, which is kind of a shame. It seems like he'd be a great father and grandfather. I feel like a lot of these prolific authors men especially just never have any kids, which is really kind of a shame. I think their legacy becomes too abstract, if that makes sense. Like their name lives on um, through their books and their work, and people like to say like artistic endeavor kind of becomes their children, but I wouldn't think that could ever replace actually having kids. Um, he responds to things like he brings up Freud and Carl Jung. I would think that he would be a much bigger fan of Carl Jung, um, considering like Carl Jung has all these mystical elements to his psychology, and Freud is really more focused, you know, on like tragic structure and sex. Um, he talks about standing up against evil. He was a soldier in World War One, and I get the impression that he believes there is like an absolute good and evil uh, that exists. Kind of similar to Noam Chomsky and the Noam Chomsky Michel Foucault debate, where Foucault says, you cannot actually define evil. Um, and Lewis riffs on similar topics. Um, I really like this book a lot. I feel like it's kind of hard to cover, or it's kind of hard to do it justice, because it's really like there are 4 books, and then within each book there's like 10 essays, and each essay is topical, so it's kind of hard to sum up all of the different many topics and talk about them. um, I would say just read it. So yeah, that's Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Check it out.